Hi. Welcome back to Obsessed by Everything Bravo, the show where we are going back to the beginning. And currently we're in sort of the early middle of the Real Housewives, and we are watching with a modern day lens. Hi, my name is Meredith. I'm your host on this journey through the Real Housewives. I hope you're enjoying it. If you are, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And also, I'd love a rating and review. Always, always, always. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube channel that you're watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, all five of you. And thanks for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking about The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Season 2, Reunion Part 2, Episode 22. I think I should buy a lottery ticket, all twos. um, so that's what we're talking about today. So last episode, we had basically an explosive fight mostly between Lisa Vanderpump and Adrian for some reason. Where the very end of the episode, Adrian was accusing Lisa Vanderpump of selling stories, and Lisa Vanderpump was incredibly insulted. Now, this will not be the last time. This is not actually the first time that Lisa Vanderpump has been accused of not selling stories, but giving stories to the press. Russell and Taylor were low-key accusing her of that. And this will definitely not be the last time. Again, what Beverly Hills kind of turns into, not really in a year or two, but like in a few years, will really turn into trying to take down Lisa Vanderpump for many, many years. Now, I just have a thing against takedown seasons. I don't think it's necessary to take down a housewife because in most instances, when they're trying to take down a housewife, it's usually someone who is really popular. And then the people who are doing it just look like fools. And that's basically what happens here. And that's what happens basically anytime these people try to take down Lisa Vanderpump. But like, on, say, The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, they're always coming after Lisa Barlow. And Lisa Barlow doesn't, she's like, no, absolutely not. She's not buying into that. And it's not even that she has any arguments, because Lisa Barlow doesn't have an argument. And sometimes I feel like Lisa Barlow is wrong. I mean, I don't actually like Lisa Barlow that much, but I just think it's funny. Also, there's a guy right now on TikTok who is going after Lisa Barlow because she's from Schenectady, but she acts like she's from Manhattan, New York City. And what's funny is one of my coworkers is from upstate New York or wherever that is. I don't know exactly. And she's like, yeah, my aunt went to high school, was good friends with Lisa Barlow in Schenectady. So I've known this for years, and I mean, who am I going to tell? Like, who cares? And so now this guy is going after her, saying like, oh, she's from Schenectady, and Lisa Barlow is like clapping back at him and all this stuff, and it's like, I don't know, it's just like so funny to me. That's just Lisa Barlow. But long story short is, it makes Heather and Whitney, who are trying to take her down, it makes them look stupid and insane. They just can't take her down. Same thing with, I mean, when Bethany comes back, they're going to try to take her down. Right now on Potomac, I think they've let it go, but they were going after Stacey Roush really hard, and it just made them look stupid. Takedown seasons don't work for anybody. And so the thing about Beverly Hills is, okay, they got rid of Lisa Vanderpump. So now what? It's just like, it's a snake eating its own tail. You know what I mean? Like, there is no point. Why are you doing this? The viewers don't like it. And it doesn't make for good storytelling. Because it's like, it's one thing when you're going after like a Danielle Staub or a Tamra, who are evil, but even then it doesn't work. You know what I mean? They've been going after Tamra for a long time, and I'd be happy for them to get rid of her, but she's still here. So it just doesn't work. So this didn't work either. This whole season where they were kind of like giving little digs to Lisa Vanderpump didn't work. She was rising above it, being funnier, being more beautiful, and it pisses Adrian off. It pisses her off to no end. But the best thing about it is she really thought she did something there. And then by the end of Lisa Vanderpump yelling at her, she was just kind of meekly sitting at the end of the couch. Now, we add Brandy. At the very end, we added Brandy, okay? Now, who brought Brandy into the fold? Adrian, who's now Brandy's BFF. Lisa Vanderpump. Is that weird? Yes and no. It's weird, yes. To Lisa Vanderpump, it's not. I'm telling you, she collects what we call broken birds. At one point, she says something about she likes broken birds. She collects broken birds. Cedric it'd be a perfect example. She takes them under her wing, she mends them, and now they're part of her army. That's how you make an excellent army. In fact, I'm reading these books. Red Rising? Hold on. The first one I read, and now the rest of them I'm Red Rising. And it's really good if you like futuristic fantasy, not romance at all. So not like an ACOTAR, but like real war and stuff like that. If you like that kind of stuff, check it out. But his whole thing is, the main character, he is trying to get people to his side. So they go to this school where they kill each other. But instead of making slaves, like just taking people over and making slaves, he gives them an option. He's like, join me. You can be free and you can choose. And that's how he gets people to his side. He rallies people to his side. That's exactly what Lisa Vanderpump is doing. Okay. And we'll see that more clearly as the seasons go on. One thing about certain housewives is Karen Huger is perfect at this. You get a new cast member on and you rally them to your side. Certain people like Vicky hate new cast members and they're always mean to them and they're always rude to them. But some people love new cast members because then they can get in there and they can be like so nice to them, and then they get them on their side in their army, right? And Lisa Vanderpump is never trying to take anyone down. That's the difference. She's really just trying to make herself look the best. It isn't about getting someone kicked off. It's about making her look the best. That's all she cares about. But the other women want her gone. And that's where the disconnect comes. You know what I mean? If they were just in there trying to make themselves look good too, I would have no problem with it. But they want her kicked off the show, So we've added Brandy. Brandy is now sitting at the end of the couch next to Camille. So it's now Brandy, Camille, Lisa Vanderpump, Andy, Kyle, Taylor, Adrian. We've had a little bit of a Taylor session. Now we're going to talk about Brandy. So Andy asked Brandy, what was harder, navigating Beverly Hills in crutches or joining this group of women? And Brandy says, I think this group of women is the hardest to get along with in town. It's been fun, like in town. It's been fun, but difficult. And so now we have the Brandy's, segments. Andy says, Brandy hobbled onto the scene with crutches, no bra, one high heel, and no filter. So we have a lot of her segments. And then Andy opens with, you call yourself a slut regularly. Is that a defense mechanism? And I think this is interesting because this was also something I questioned, and I thought maybe she was just trying to say it before other people said it, which she was, but basically, she had said she had heard some of the gossip that was going on in some of what the ladies were saying about her because the way that she dressed and the fact that she was single. And she says, I really don't care. I'm not a slut. I wish I was because sex is fun, but I just joke around a lot. So basically what she's saying is she knew that the ladies were talking about the way that she dresses, and so she was going to beat them to the punch so that they couldn't call her a slut, which is kind of like what we assumed anyway, but I think it's interesting that she did that based off of the gossip she was hearing about herself. So then Andy asked Camille, Camille has nothing to say. He just keeps asking her everything. He's like, Camille, what did you think about Brandy calling herself a slut? And Camille says, I think she's a riot. I think it's funny and self-deprecating, and I don't think she's a slut. So then Andy said, we get a lot of emails about your bikini. And Lisa goes, what bikini? So a question was, Brandy, in Hawaii, did you feel the need to be so exposed Why did you feel the need to be so exposed in front of married men? And Brandy goes, who was married? Which, Kyle goes crazy about Mauricio. Another question is, when you go on a trip with your girlfriends, is it cool to have your ass out? And Brandy's like, that's just me in general. I grew up that way, that I'm not going to change who I am for anyone. My bathing suits have been the same for 20 years. All my girlfriends wear the same tiny bathing suits. And honestly, they're lucky that I had a top on. Another question, looking back, would you have handled yourself any differently this season? And Brady's like, yeah, probably. I have regrets for sure, but you can't go back and take it back. And she says, do I wish I'd taken a Xanax and gotten on a flight and then been on camera? I was mortified, but you just have to own it and keep moving. And then another question. Okay, so now we're getting into game night. Was, Kyle, you're my favorite, but I saw an ugly side to you at your charity event. Why were you so catty towards Brandy? Kyle says, well, the fact that she was sort of like coming in, I had my guard up, scared. I was defensive and ridiculous. And they got many emails about game night. One of them was, I get that you're protective of your sister, but my admiration was shot down at game night. You brought a whole new meaning to the word mean girls, or phrase mean girls. What do you say to the people who call you a mean girl? And Kyle's like, I agree. I wasn't even giving her a chance at game night. One of the girls had told me that Brandy had said something about Kim being on drugs and that she kept going to the bathroom. And to me, I was done at that point. I was already stressed out by Kim and I was on edge whenever I was around my sister, and I felt badly. I feel badly about that night. A question to Brandy, Brandy, you were not innocent. You threatened to kill Kyle. Do you, this is so ridiculous. Do you take any blame for game night turning into a flaming ball of hate? And Brandy says, absolutely. I take responsibility for losing my temper, but you can only be pushed so far. And I felt like I was being bullied in a room where I had no friends, and it continued and continued. Everyone has a breaking point, and I just got there. When you get there, you just fight back. Another question is, did you cross a line when you accused Kim of being on meth? And Brandy says, do I regret that specifically? Yes. But the truth was, she was on something. She was in and out of the bathroom all night, and now she's in rehab. Clearly, I wasn't wrong. So, doubling down on the drug addict. Kyle says, you were wrong about what it was. And that's a very serious accusation, which is why I got so defensive, because I know once you say something like that in front of the cameras, it's going to follow you. And I get that. Like, look, I get why Kyle was being defensive of her sister, but I will say that they started it. I don't think Brandy would have gone there if they hadn't been excluding her the whole night. I feel like just a small little bit of kindness would have gone a long way with Brandy, and she never would have made that accusation. I think Kim's behavior was odd. I think she did admit to taking meds that she probably shouldn't have and coming into this party. Yeah, I don't know. So another question is, Kyle, considering that Kim is in rehab, do you owe Brandy an apology? Kyle says, well, I already apologized to Brandy a long time ago. This has nothing to do with my sister being in rehab. Brandy says, it was a dark weekend, and after the facts, I got a long text from Kyle, and I feel like I owned up on my part. They weren't accepting any responsibility for a long time. Now that you've seen it back, Kyle called me and apologized for what she said about me. So basically what she's saying is they've spoken privately. I don't know what the timeline would be, but once Kyle saw the episode, she was able to realize that they took it too far. And so she did call Brandy off camera and give her a real much needed and deserved apology. So then, and this is where Lisa's wrong here, because she doesn't need to jump in on this conversation. She wasn't a part of any of this. Lisa says, I was backing Kyle because I didn't know Brandy. And Andy's like, well, then you saw the show. And she's like, yeah, I was mortified at game night. I said that I backed Kyle as a good friend, but then I saw it and I realized how bad it was. And it was not how it was being explained to me. Andy said, in your blog, you said you grew up with parents who explained, he's talking to Brandy. In your blog, you said you grew up with parents who explained bullying isn't defensible. I guess they don't teach that to child stars. Do you think Kim and Kyle were bullies? Brandy is like, I do. I've never been in a situation like that in my life. I was taught to love everyone equally and give everyone a chance. I think she was on the defense because she thought I was something I wasn't, but we've got it we're past it now, and I would never want to do that to anyone. Taylor says, well, she was on the defense and you were on the defense, and then you said, I will kill you 2 times. And Kyle goes, and you said, bring it on, bitch, first. And Brandy goes, again, no. Brandy would never have taken it that way if you guys had been nice to her. So Brandy goes, it was a room against me. I was just sitting in a chair with a broken leg. You get in my face, and I said, I'm going to knock you out. It's simple. Andy said, are you a fighter? And Brandy said, no, but I feel like I could be. What's so funny is like some of these people, they act like they're so hard. Brandy, I think actually would. I feel like she scares me. So Taylor says, well, she was protecting Kim because Kim has a real disease, and to say, I will kill you, that was pretty harsh. So if you're going to say the messages that your parents taught you, I'm sure that was one of them too. Like basically not to say you're going to kill somebody. And Brandy goes, okay, Taylor. Brandy has no like love for Taylor here, which is weird because they were friends at the beginning. Like Taylor was one of the only people to like actually reach out to Brandy to try to be friendly with her. Now, once Camille got to know her, Camille and Brandy were friendly, but in the beginning it was just Taylor. Lisa goes, well, it was a figure of speech. I'll fucking kill you. Andy says, is that a figure of speech? And Lisa's like, well, no, but it was a back and forth. We all saw. And Andy goes, talk to me about hiding the crutch. So Kyle's like, I didn't do that. That's the truth. Kim came to me later and said, it's right behind the sofa, but nobody knew that. I wouldn't do that to you. And Brandy said, but you had knowledge of it. And Kyle's like, yeah, she told me. We laughed, but it was right there, right behind you. So Brandy's like, well, maybe someone should have told me where my crutches were. And then Kyle goes, well, I was out of the room when you were looking. Again, not taking really any responsibility for this. Just typical. She says, I had nothing to do with it. That was terrible. I understand. Brandy says, you can't say you had nothing to do with it because you had knowledge, and knowledge is power. And Kyle goes, give it a rest. And Andy's like, I asked about it. And Kyle's like, look, I'm just saying I already apologized for all this. Again, you apologize off camera. He's trying to get you to apologize on camera so that all the viewers can see. Kyle. So we go on commercial break, we come back. And then Andy says, spending any time with the ladies of Beverly Hills, and one thing is clear, they exude refinement and class. But then he asks everyone their favorite curse word. And then there was a question is if letting Jiggy drink out of Adrian's nice dinnerware was proper etiquette. And Lisa was like, oh, that wasn't me. It was Ken. But would I let him do that at home? Yes. So basically she's saying I wouldn't do it out in public, but we would do it at home. So what did Adrian think of that? And she says, I thought maybe I should let Jackpot over and let him drink out of her beautiful champagne glasses. And Lisa's like, he would be welcome to. So then there was a question, what's the difference between sexy and slutty? And Brandy says, however you feel powerful and confident is how you should roll. Slutty is like labia. So as long as your labia are not out, you're not slutty. And then Taylor and Kyle act like they are offended that she said the word labia. So Andy is like, well, what do you guys feel like the difference is? Kyle says the difference between slutty is when you're just showing too much. Sexy is leaving something to the imagination. Okay. So we have two very different answers. Labia versus too much. All right. Now we're going to switch gears again. Andy says, um, Lisa, you've not been shy to admit that you've never been a fan of Taylor, and Taylor knew this all along. How in the world did you two suddenly become BFFs? I want to go back to the tea party. Taylor, you said that Taylor, you said that Lisa had always treated you poorly. How and why did you feel like she treated you poorly? And Taylor says, I did not understand Lisa's humor. Little things she used to say really bothered me. And I'm a very insecure person. She would say things that would hurt my feelings. And it was just my own insecurities, not based in what she knew or what I had told her. Okay. And I want to go back to that tea because I feel like even though I spend a lot of time talking about that tea, I feel like the dynamics of the entire show changed after the tea for the better, I think, maybe. But this was where this was after that lunch that Taylor had, like she was going to get an award that she did not win. And she had invited everyone but Lisa, right? And Kyle accidentally spilled the beans because she assumed that Lisa would be invited. And so immediately after that, Taylor had to kind of explain herself. So her explanation was going to be, well, you kept saying that you're not my friend. You're not my friend, which is not what Lisa said. We beat that over the head. And she, for like 20 minutes, I've never seen anybody in real life or in Housewives crying and whining over, I just want to be your friend. I've bent over backwards. And I would like for the editors to give me an example of when Taylor bent over backwards to try to be Lisa's friend. I've never seen it. I mean, she's invited her to all the events, but that's part of the show. Like, you have to invite everybody to all the events, especially like in the first season. We're not hating on each other now. I mean, except if you're Atlanta and you just don't invite Nene to your birthday party. But that's not how this works. So yeah, you invited her to all the events that you had because you had to. But I never felt like you were bending over backwards to be best friends with Lisa. This was just your way to be able to say, and Lisa's a bitch, and, you know, like whatever it is. And everybody thinks your ego is huge. You have a screenshot of yourself as your screensaver on your iPad. How ridiculous that sentence is. Unfortunately for Taylor, that turned into Camille revealing her abuse, unfortunately for Taylor. But I think in the end, it was probably a good thing. Got Taylor out of that relationship, right? So what she's saying is nothing changed about Lisa. What she's saying is, I didn't understand Lisa's sense of humor. I took it as insulting, but she's really just joking. And essentially, I don't think anything changed. Taylor just decided. Oh, I think something changed for Lisa because I think when Taylor was going nuts, I think Lisa, you could kind of see her having a realization like, whoa, something's wrong here. I don't know if this really has anything to do with me. And I'm going to not put a wall up around Taylor anymore. I'm really going to like take care of her. I think that came into Lisa's, like, I'm not going to treat this woman as an enemy. And I really feel like for Lisa, because Taylor was sharing all this information about this abuse, and she did in the first season, and Lisa basically said that. It was like, I don't like Russell, and I never will, and it's because of everything that Taylor has told me about him. And I think for her, she just didn't want to like get close into this kind of volatile relationship with Taylor. And she saw Kyle was doing it and she was jealous. I mean, that's normal. That's a normal emotion. And she was keeping Taylor at arm's length because she was just like, I don't know. Something is going on with this woman and I just can't really have that in my orbit. Right or wrong, I think that's what kind of. But then when Taylor, after she'd had her third or fourth breakdown at this point, and they're at the tea party and she's having her breakdown before Camille, you know, exposes everything, I think Lisa sat back and said, this woman actually does have a lot of issues, and I'm not going to fight with her anymore. I'm going to let my walls down, and I'm going to take her under my wing. I'm going to protect her. I'm going to heal her, this little broken bird. And that was that. I think that's what changed for Lisa. And I think Taylor just decided she wasn't going to be offended by some of the things that Lisa said anymore. And I think that's it. What I think is interesting is how that changed the dynamics of all the other relationships, because I feel like for Taylor, I feel like being friends with Lisa changed the dynamics with her and Adrian for sure. And I think it really changed sort of like the makeup of how the show went down, right? Because even when we're talking about the white part, Taylor went on Pandora's bachelorette party. No one else did. Kyle couldn't go. She was probably invited. And then the white party happened after the email. Lisa was the only one who was really on Taylor's side. Even Kyle who was crying and didn't want to uninvite them. Only didn't want to uninvite them because she was like, I don't want to uninvite somebody to my party. It's not like because she was like, Taylor's my best friend, and to uninvite my best friend would be catastrophic to my well-being. It was like, I just don't want to uninvite people to my party. So after that, Lisa was really the only one who was 100% backing Taylor, which is interesting. Interesting that it's not Adrian, who theoretically would be better friends to Taylor, right? So then Andy asked everyone else, were you ladies surprised with the quick flip? Camille was like, yes. Adrian said it was quick. And Lisa said, I think at the tea party, what turned it is that she desperately wanted to be my friend. I thought, why am I fighting this woman when she wants to be friends? And I could tell she was starting to spiral, and she's like, seemed like she was in an emotional crisis. And I just wanted to turn it around. So Andy asked, Taylor, at the tea party, you said Lisa's ego was out of control. How did you feel about that? And Taylor says, look, Jiggy was tweeting things that I don't think were appropriate and calling people names. What names? And she said, like a duck or a blowfish. And then Brandy goes, but you call yourself that all the time. See how Brandy is sticking up for Lisa Vanderpump. Brandy should really be staying out of this. This is not her fight, but she's sticking up for Lisa Vanderpump. And Taylor goes, I'm not talking to you. The point is, I just felt like the whole Jiggy thing was perpetuating a new personality for Lisa, and I didn't like it. I want to remind you, they're talking about Twitter. This is the second time so I don't know what was going on with Jiggy's Twitter. I feel like nowadays it's very common for people to have TikToks, Instagram for their pets. Why not? People love to see pets. Honestly, if we could get rid of 98% of most of social media and just have pets, I would be happy with that. So then a question was, Lisa, you seem blindsided when Taylor said all the women were talking behind your back. Did you think all the women are afraid to confront you? And Lisa's like, I don't know. They all said that. They all did that. She said, well, Brandy is like, I didn't say that. Just one person said that. Basically, like, she's coming to Lisa's defense, and she's like, I never said, like, I only heard one person. I've never heard people talking about you. I only heard one person talking about you. So then Adrian was like, well, who was talking about her? And Brandy goes, you. So then Adrian's like, what did I say? And Brandy said, I heard from people that work for you that you don't like Lisa. And Adrian goes, why would you say that? And Brandy says, what do you mean? Adrian says, why would you tell her that? That's not nice. And Brandy says, because she's my friend and we were talking. Adrian says, I thought we were friends. And Brandy was like, I haven't seen you since the show wrapped. You don't even return my text messages. And then Adrian goes, she, as in Lisa Vanderpump, is clearly reaching out to you for one reason. Brandy's like, she never talks to me about any of you guys. And I invited you, Camille, Lisa to my birthday party, and Adrian couldn't come. And then she didn't even get back to me for a month. So then now they're going back and forth about, well, I invited you to this, but you didn't come to this. And long story short, Brandy's like, I haven't seen you since the show wrapped, meaning they stopped filming. And but basically she's like, I talk to Lisa every single day on the phone, and I haven't even talked to you since we stopped filming. So who's really a friend? You see what I'm talking about? You see what I'm talking about? So then Lisa goes, I think that's mean-spirited, saying I only reach out to Brandy because I want her on my side. I don't need anybody on my side. I found her funny in Hawaii. And we don't talk about the other women. If I have something to say about another woman, I'll say it to their face. Oh my God. Continuing to dog walk Adrian. Continuing. And now Adrian knows Brandy has been telling Lisa everything that she's been saying about her. So now there's a question. Camille, Kyle, Adrian, do you feel like Taylor tried to throw you under the bus with Lisa? Camille's like, yes. Taylor said, this is Camille talking. She said, Camille, this, and completely put my name into it. And when I watched the show, and then she went outside and she was talking to Paul, and she said, all the other girls said they would have my back. I never said I would have her back against Lisa. Never. And Taylor was like, well, you and I had a phone call, and you said Lisa pulled me aside at the seance and said, Taylor is not my friend. Camille says, no, not at the seance. You're lying. So then it's like, okay, so she's lying about it being at the seance, but then what? So another viewer question is, why did any of the women back up Taylor when she confronted Lisa at the tea party? Or why didn't any of the women back up Taylor when she confronted Lisa at the tea party? Or are you guys all afraid of her? Kyle says, this was their argument. We didn't want to get involved. I don't need any more drama in my life. I'm friends with everyone. So another viewer question, do the other ladies think Lisa's friendship with Taylor is genuine? And Brandy says, I saw Lisa at dinner and I said something negative about Taylor and she had her back 100%. No cameras. Their friendship is genuine. So then he asked, well, what was your issue with Taylor? This is where I have a little issue. I have an issue with Brandy here. So Brandy says, and we've already heard this, I saw Russell at the Glen and he told me that he and Taylor sent the email. And that he felt horrible about it and had always liked Camille. And honestly, that didn't sit well with me. You don't think that maybe he was trying to manipulate you? So Taylor says, do you mean the day after he sent me those vile texts? And Brandy says, you can say whatever you want to say now. I'm just saying that's how it happened. Taylor says, well, do you want to check my text messages? I was there when I received it. And Brandy's like, I'm just telling you what Russell said to me. And Taylor says, you know what? Russell is a master manipulator. Do you want to go and talk to the 50 people that are suing me right now because he made them business promises? And Lisa's like, look, you have to understand she's only repeating what Russell said. And Taylor's like, I understand. And Brandy says, and she has your back 100%. And Taylor says, she knows the truth and she knows more than you, honey. I mean, Eddie says that you slit his tires. Is that true? And Brandy's like, yeah. So Andy goes, you slit his tires? And she's like, well, I own them. And I just took a knife and just kind of cut them a little bit. Also, I told him not to get on the motorcycle because he would probably get hurt. Taylor goes, I rest my case. So Brandy's like, well, what's that? What's your case? And then Camille's in the background. She's like, yeah, what's your case? And then Brandy goes, so when does that book come out? Stop. Okay, so here's the issue that I have with Brandy is she believes whatever Russell told her. And it's kind of, this is why all the other women think that Taylor had some part in writing the email. And I can't speak to whether she knew or didn't know about the email. She said she doesn't know about the email, but Brandy is taking Russell's side, and Brandy later will be like, I just don't think that you should be talking about him when he's dead. Personally, I don't feel like that. I think that we can piss on his name for all that we care. I think he's a piece of shit. And I think if he beat his wife up, I think everybody should know about it. And, you know, sorry, if you don't want people talking shit about you, maybe don't be a shit person. That's just my personal opinion. But Brandy is like inclined to believe him. And I think that maybe we should just believe women. And I don't know why she's getting all in on going in on Taylor. Just let Taylor be. Now, do I feel that it's appropriate for Taylor to release a book less than 6 months after he died? No. I think that's weird, but the elephant in the room is, and like I said in the beginning, why I think he really killed himself. It was not because, I mean, I think maybe a little bit had to do with the fact that he was going to be outed as a wife beater on television and that he was probably never going to have a business deal again, because who really wants to deal with something like that that's out in the open? It's fine if it's behind closed doors. You know, it's fine if you go to an island and abuse children and nobody knows. But when you do it out in the open, excuse me, we cannot do any more business dealings with you. So, you know, but the issue really is that he was upside down in a bunch of business shit. And he was owing like millions of dollars. Again, we will talk about, this is going to be basically Taylor's storyline next season. And so now that because they were still married, everyone's knocking on her door to get the money that Russell owed them, even though she's not involved in any of his business dealings. So she basically is releasing a book because she has to support herself and Kennedy, right? Now, and I don't know how much money she made for the Housewives, but so yeah, I understand why she did that, but also I think it's a little tacky. Okay, it's just like, you know, weird. So Andy asked, you think it's inappropriate that she wrote a book? And Brandy says, well, it's been a hot minute. And then Taylor's like going nuts. She says 3 women die every day from domestic violence. And then she's like listing off all these statistics. And she's like, do you want me to wait another month? How about 6? So 600 more women can die. Brandy says, this is about your daughter and Russell. And Taylor's like, this is none of your business. And then Brandy, I think, made a very good point. You made it the world's business. Basically, like, you can't say it's none of my business when you're putting your entire business out there. I can have an opinion on it. And she's right here. So Kyle says, somebody died here. And Brandy's like, exactly. Like, let him rest in peace. Which I don't agree with that. I hope he's looking up from us from hell. And Kyle's like, do not judge until you've walked in somebody else's shoes. And Brandy goes, oh, fuck off. Then Kyle goes, oh, wow, you're angry, Spice. So Brandy's like, what are you? And Kyle goes, look, she's a single mom now with a husband who killed himself. And Brandy says, and she wrote a book in 1 second. And Kyle's like, well, you went on a reality TV show to sit there and call me and say that you were an asshole. And Brandy said, I said my blog is rather aggressive this week. So what she's saying is, in the blogs, it's always these fucking blogs. In Brandy's blog, I guess she said that Kyle was an asshole. And before that came out, she called her up and said, hey, guess what? I say some not nice things about you in my blog. Just a heads up. So that's what that is. Kyle says, I've been nice to you. I invited you to my party, but you said you can't come, like her Christmas party, but you can't come because you have your boys. And I told you, why don't you bring them? And Brandy's like, why would I want to go to your holiday party? And then Kyle's like, and then you called me a cunt in a text that was supposed to go to somebody else, but it accidentally went to me. And Andy goes, is that true? And Brandy's like, yeah. He can never make me hate Brandy. I don't care what kind of like amoebas she has in her face. Kyle says, this is the Brandy that I've heard about that the cameras don't always see. You came in attacking everyone today. You're going after Taylor when she's had a rough year. When Eddie left you, I'm sure you wanted a little sympathy. Her husband killed himself. You're hitting below the belt. And then Lisa defends Brandy. I didn't even write down what she said. Lisa is having Brandy's back. Like, it's crazy. So we go to commercial break and then we come back. And Andy says last season ended with a blowout fight between Kim and Kyle. And since then, the two sisters have tried hard to pick up the pieces, but putting it back together wasn't so easy. So now we have the Kim and Kyle segment, which is a weird why. Kim's not even here. And so then he says, Kim's not here. Do you think seeing herself on the show contributed to her realizing she had a problem? Kyle says, to be honest, she didn't watch. She doesn't show up a lot, and she's really not that into being on the show. So Andy's like, well, why is she on the show? And Kyle says, I thought it would be a good idea for her to be on the show, to give her some responsibility and to have something outside of her kids, because she puts so much focus on them that she like doesn't have anything else going on, and they're basically grown. So I thought this would keep her on track. So what Kyle's trying to tell us is that she thought that being on the show would stop some of Kim's alcoholism. So Kyle says, I think that the fight last year was the worst fight we've ever had, but we were both holding in so much. It had gotten to the point that I didn't think anything would change. So we were being very passive aggressive to each other in our relationship. And after holding it in for so much for so long, I just blew that night. And to be honest, it ended up helping our relationship because it brought a lot of stuff up to the surface and we were able to talk about it. So a viewer question is, were you enabling her? And Kyle says, it may appear that way on the show, but that's because there are some things that I don't want to address on camera. So when the cameras are not there, I'm not an enabler. I'm not an enabler. And that's part of her anger towards me. If I let her do what she wanted and never pushed back, then we probably wouldn't have any problems. And Lisa says, if you look at the season, Kim's storyline is basically about not her showing up. So it was hard because we were quite close. Like, how can you expose something we aren't sure about? So we were just waiting for Kyle to take the lead. And Kyle said, so they're talking about Kim's alcoholism. And basically Lisa's saying the whole season, Kim's whole deal was acting erratically and not showing up. We all knew something was wrong, but it wasn't our place to say something. So we were trying to let Kim come to that decision because I'm so close to Kyle. I know it would hurt Kyle if we started to say something. And Kyle says, before this happened, she just wasn't ready. And if we'd forced her into it, she just would have become angry and she wouldn't have agreed to it. And a viewer question was, everyone knew that Taylor was in an abusive relationship and no one would say anything. And everyone knew Kim has substance abuse issues, but no one but Brandy would say anything. Ladies, do you think keeping quiet did more harm than good? Kyle says, it's difficult for a viewer to judge how we handle it. Our lives are very open, but there are certain things we do privately, and there are certain things we do openly on the show. So Andy asks, I'm curious if it would have been freeing to you if someone else had just taken her aside and talked to her about it. And Kyle says, I actually think that would be a relief to me. And then Brandy goes, maybe I helped you. Like, she's being so for real when she says this. She's like, maybe I helped. It got it out there and everyone had to talk about it. It's not the right way, but maybe it helped. And Kyle goes, no offense, it had nothing to do with you. Well, first of all, Kim has alcoholism, not crystal meth addiction. It still cracks me up that they're just talking about crystal meth because it's like, meth is such a hard drug. Like if you've ever been around or seen anybody like in real life that has a meth addiction, they're not keeping it together in the slightest. I don't know. Okay, so now we're going to go to a Camille section. So then Andy is like, now, remember last year, all those names that the audience was calling you? And he like rereads all the names. He's like, I couldn't even catch them all. Conniving, passive aggressive, catty, cruel. But here's a typical email we got this season. And it says, Camille, I must admit last season I despised you. But after watching you handle yourself with grace amid a messy divorce, you've become my new favorite. How do you explain such a big change? And Brandy goes, well, she dropped the dead weight and now she's a new person. And Andy's like, what a year a difference makes. And he's like, are you still dating that guy with washboard abs? He's 8 years younger. They've all met him. He's really sweet. They've been together 6 to 7 months. They're happy and they're enjoying each other's company. And then he's like, is this guy doing it for you in the bedroom? Absolutely. Oh my God. Do the kids like him? They like him. And then there's still an ongoing custody battle that Kelsey does not speak to her, which is a shame. And Brandy says sometimes it has to do with like the new woman in their life. They don't feel like they can speak to us, and that's why this kind of thing happens. And I guess she's telling us that Leanne doesn't want Eddie talking to her. It's kind of and Andy says, what was it like hearing Kelsey talking to national media outlets about meeting his current wife, but you guys were still married? And Camille was like, yeah, it was very hurtful. He glamorizes and romanticizes their meeting, but we were still married and they were together for a while. And I guess the only reason he even filed for divorce is because she got pregnant. So Andy said, Kelsey called you being on the show his parting gift to you. And Camille was like, first he said he left me because I wanted to do the show. And then he said he told me to be on the show. So which one is it? And then a viewer question, do you take guilty pleasure that your show gets bigger ratings than your husband's new show? And Camille was like, yes, absolutely. They asked why she still goes by Grammar, which this is a dumb question because anybody with small children is going to keep their husband's name because that's what their kids are named. Why is that even a question? Like, also the trouble it takes to change a name, like why? I don't know. But Brandy, she actually changed her name back to her maiden name. And Andy asked, well, why did you change your name? And Brandy was like, well, there was too many Cibrians floating around. So another viewer question, after taking such a beating last season, did you make a choice to act differently? And Camille says, no, this is who I am this season. This is me. Last season, I was under a lot of pressure. And Andy goes, come on, you're not going to hang the whole thing on Kelsey cheating. And she's like, no, I mean, like, what are you trying to say? So Andy's like, it seems like you made a calculated effort to maybe shut down a little more. And Camille says, well, I'm not kissing my friends on the lips anymore. What does that mean? Like, she's like, I've been humbled a lot. Lisa says she wouldn't say the things she did last year, like how many houses she has, this nanny. And I think when Kelsey left, it changed her. Then another viewer question is, you're kind of boring. Are you trying that hard to avoid drama? Camille says, I made a conscious effort to try to avoid drama. And Kyle goes, at game night, when we jumped up, Camille jumped up and she was out of there. And Brandy says, yeah, my party in Malibu, she hid in the bathroom all night. And then Andy says, well, who do you think, what is the real Camille? And Kyle says, this is the real Camille. The real Camille is sweet and she's funny and she's a mom. And that's just what you see here. So there's that. Now we go to commercial break. We come back and we got to do another Taylor segment because we have to have a cliffhanger for the episode. So then Andy says, Taylor, we mentioned that earlier that you have just finished a book. Why did you write it? She says, I was journaling throughout my therapy, and when I was reading back through it, I recognized the patterns in my life that allowed me to be in a controlling relationship. And I thought, there are girls out there who need like a little self-esteem boost, and I think I can give that to them. So Andy asks, when did the abuse start? And she says, when I was pregnant. And then he says, and it continued all the way through to now. And she says, yeah, about every 6 weeks or so. And he says, why did you not report it or leak it? And she says, well, I didn't want him to go to jail. And he said he would sue me for like slander, and then I would be out on the street. Plus, there's visitation. Like, once you get a divorce, you have to send your kids to this person. Knowing he has a volatile temper and not being there to protect her. So I would just send Kennedy there to spend the night with this person. And Kyle says, also, she was scared to press charges because she knew after he wouldn't be able to work. And she has a child to take care of. So there's always that financial factor. Like, never forget. And it's like, you could live just fine in another zip code that's not Beverly Hills. You could go down to Hollywood and get a bungalow just like Erica Jane did. And I'm sure it's expensive, but it's probably not as expensive as the Beverly Hills house you're living in now. and have a perfectly nice life for your daughter. She has a job. It's not like she doesn't work. I don't know why that wasn't good enough, but whatever. That's not here or there. But what she's saying is, what Kyle is trying to tell us is, one of the reasons she wouldn't press charges is because nobody would want to do business dealings with Russell after that. And so she just kept quiet. Andy says, how far back had Taylor been telling you all about the abusive relationship? Adrian says, after a few months of meeting her, so they've known each other for years. She started telling me I was concerned. And I said, what can we do so you can leave him? Taylor, you wrote that Adrian thought the show would be a good way for you to make money so you could leave Russell. Taylor's like, yes. She said, you have to find your own way out of this and you need money. Andy said, I've heard you speak about when you found Russell's body. And this is like me not remembering that Taylor found the body. Yikes. That he had left a briefcase. And what was in that? She says, several files I knew nothing about, 10 different bank accounts, an office in Brazil, flash drives I have not opened yet because I'm afraid to be sued for what's in them. He had a lot going on that I didn't know about. And Andy says, so he was in severe financial trouble and now you are. And Taylor's like, yeah. So he says, right after Russell's death, his business associate also committed suicide. Do you think the two are related? Taylor says, I have no idea what the link is. And then she makes a vague statement that people are trying to communicate with me and tell me, basically, like, people are being murdered over whatever. None of that. I've never known any of that to be valid. I don't think Russell was murdered. I think he committed suicide, and probably his business associate also was like, oh fuck, now I'm on the hook for all of this, and he did the same thing. And I feel like there was a lot of stuff that we did not know about, of course. But I don't think he was murdered because there was never any evidence that's ever been brought to the table other than her making this fake statement. So that's the end of this episode. Yeah, I feel like we've kind of beat the abuse story over, with a dead horse. Not much going on with Camille, and Brandy, of course, is making a splash. One thing we'll talk about, we still have one more episode, that we do not have Camille. Camille does not get a diamond next season. She is just a friend of. So without her going nutso on everybody, she's really kind of boring, right? But we'll save that for the next episode. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we will talk to you in the next episode, reunion part 3. Bye.